Hey guys, welcome back to Two Sisters and a TV. Today, I want to take a look at Three's Company. I'm going to just jump off into it and not have any kind of delays. Three's Company, one of my all-time favorite TV shows. It still is. It still comes on TV. It's over on Pluto almost constantly. It's on Antenna Monday through Friday. 2 episodes, 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 Central. Very, very popular TV show in the late 70s and early 80s. Not without controversy, however. Now today, Three's Company, very G-rated. I mean, it is so mild and so tame, no one gives it a second thought. But in those days, lots of controversy. Because for a guy to live with 2 girls and no one is married, definitely not very well received by a lot of people. Three's Company, of course, comes from the British version called Man About the House, which is very successful as well. And it was decided that they wanted to bring a version to America and see how it would do over here. Now, Three's Company initially was a TV show that the network was very nervous about. It was, there were 3 pilots done first and foremost. There were 3 pilots done for Three's Company. The very first one had different actresses. The characters' names were completely different. Jack's name was not Jack, it was David, and he did not want to be a chef, but he wanted to be an actor. The girls, I believe their names were, I don't remember their names. I think they were Jenny and Samantha or something like that. The brunette was portrayed by Valerie Curtin. I don't recall the actress who portrayed the blonde roommate. Norman Fell and Audra Lindley were still, they were in this pilot as the Ropers. So John Ritter, Norman Fell, and Audra Lindley were in all 3 pilots. This pilot was filmed, the first one in 1975, I believe. Maybe early 1976. But again, the network was nervous and they wanted the girls replaced. So in comes pilot number 2. This time you change the names of the characters. You have Jack, Janet, and Chrissy, and you have Joyce DeWitt as the brunette roommate Janet, and Susan Lanier as the pretty blonde Chrissy. And of course, you still, again, had John Ritter, Norman Fell, and Audra Lindley as Jack and the Ropers. Fred Silverman, who was president over on ABC, was all for Three's Company coming to the network. Fred Silverman was a genius when it came to revamping networks. He did wonderful things for both CBS and ABC. He turned both those networks into the #1 network in the country. Didn't do so well for NBC, but that's for another episode at another time. So he was all for Three's Company. He knew that was going to be another good show for his network. It was going to be a success. And he really supported that show joining the ABC roster. However, he did not, for whatever reason, care for Susan Lanier. So he demanded that she be replaced. So then you had to shoot yet a 3rd pilot. There was a casting call out for a blonde roommate. Suzanne Summers' agent found out about the casting call, informed her of it. She had already tried out for and filmed actually 9 different pilots Suzanne had. None of them went anywhere. So she wasn't very enthusiastic about Three's Company either. So but she went in anyway. She figured she had nothing to lose. And so she read with Joyce DeWitt. And of course, she had already done some episodic television. She'd done an episode One Day at a Time, and she had done some other episodic television shows. She had been in American Graffiti. Of course, she was the hot blonde in the T-Bird, the white T-Bird. So she went in, read with Joyce DeWitt before the Suits at ABC, and of course, she got the part. John Ritter knew right away that she was perfect for the part of Chrissy, as did Joyce DeWitt. So they shot the 3rd and final pilot, the one that we all see today in syndication, and the one that we see if you have the DVD collection. That pilot was filmed in January 1977. Three's Company made its debut March the 15th, 1977, a Thursday night, right before 8 is Enough made its debut as well. The ratings, not bad. They were pretty good for a late season TV show, because having made its debut in March, the season was almost over when Three's Company made its debut. So considering the timing, the ratings really were not that bad. And they seemed to go up each episode. There were 6 episodes in the very first season of Three's Company. And each episode, after each one would air, the ratings went up a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, to the point of where the network was so impressed that they decided to bring Three's Company on board for the fall season, and that they would order a full season of episodes, which in those days, that was normally like 22 episodes for a full season. So when Three's Company came back that September of 1977, it absolutely exploded in the ratings. It ended up finishing the 1977-78 season as the 3rd highest watched TV show in the country. It was right after Happy Days and just ahead of Charlie's Angels. Made huge stars out of Joyce DeWitt, John Ritter, and Suzanne Summers, as well as Norman Fell and Audra Lindley. Norman Fell had been a character actor for years. He had been in episodes of The Fugitive and Rhoda. He had been in Ocean's 11 with the Rat Pack, had been in Bullet with Steve McQueen. So he had done a lot of television and movie work. And this was really what put him in the forefront and really changed his life, changed his career. So Three's Company, again, not without controversy. There are people today in their 50s who were kids at the time, and their parents would not let them watch Three's Company because it was just too racy, which, again, that's unbelievable. If you look at the show in 2022, it's hard to fathom, but true story. Now, my mom was the opposite. I, if anything, introduced my mom to Three's Company. I discovered it when I was in 1st grade. I was channel surfing one night and I ran across their Christmas episode. It was the only Christmas episode that they ever did. This episode was probably about 5 minutes into the episode. I caught it about 5 minutes after the episode had started. And when they went to the commercials, I was in love with the show. I remember saying to myself, ooh, I like this show. When it was over, I ran. I found my mom in the kitchen. I was telling her about this brand new show about Jack, Jen, and Chrissy and Mr. and Mrs. Roper. And she, listened and thought it was, she did not ignore me. She found it amusing that I was so enthusiastic about yet another TV show. Finally, I guess about maybe 2-3 months later, she sat down and watched it with me one night. She fell in love with it too. She particularly was crazy about John Ritter. And so, so I was fortunate enough as to be able to watch the show when it was on in its original run. And I still watch it today over on Antenna TV when I have the time. Now, speaking of Three's Company, before I go any further, there is a fantastic book out there called Come and Knock on Our Door, written by Chris Mann. Chris Mann, too, was one of the kids back in the 70s and early 80s, and he was watching Three's Company as well. His parents did not restrict him from watching it either, and he has written a fantastic book about Three's Company. He has everything you can even think about Three's Company, want to know about that show, is in that book. Now, the book is out of print, but you can find copies over on eBay, on Amazon. You can try Abe's Books, BW Books, maybe Barnes & Noble. You can find it, but it's pretty expensive. Now, I was blessed to get my copy for only $3 at Half Price Books. That was like probably 20 years ago, or maybe not that long ago, but it's been some time ago when since I bought my book. But the book now, I've seen it as high as like $75. $50. But honestly, if you're a big Three's Company fan, it's going to be worth the investment because you can't find a better book than his. Again, it's called Come Knock on Our Door by Chris Mann, Mann. So Three's Company, of course, very successful. It ended up becoming some weeks the number one show in the country by the 1978-79 season. The popularity of the show caused the producers to want to follow in the footsteps of the British version and spin off The Landlords, because that's what they did over there, the landlords got their own spinoff. I believe it was called George and Mildred. It was on for like about 5-6 years. Very successful. So they wanted to replicate that same formula here. However, Norman Fell was really not at all interested in leaving Three's Company. Again, the man had a lot of experience in TV and in films, and he knew that staying on a successful TV show was viable, that it was not smart to jump ship. But he really was outvoted because Audra Lindley wanted to do the spinoff. The producers wanted to do it. So he was pretty much, on his own. He didn't have anyone to back him up or stand with him. So he reluctantly went along with the Ropers. He did, however, ask the producers to put in the stipulation that if the show failed, that, they could go back to Three's Company. So the producers said that we'll give it a year. If the show, lasts longer than a year, if the show lasts less than a year or less, you can come back. And so that gave him some peace of mind. So he went on over and decided to do The Ropers. The Ropers made its debut in March of 1979. It was placed right after Three's Company on Tuesday nights. And it was very successful. No doubt because of the fact that it was following Three's Company. Tuesday nights on ABC, unbeatable in those days. So yeah, The Ropers, again, could not really help but be successful in the beginning. I watched it, but I had a feeling that it wouldn't last very long. That was just a feeling that I had, and unfortunately, my feeling was right. Because for the 1979-1980 season, ABC moved The Ropers from Tuesday nights to Saturday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 Central. It was the lead show on Saturday nights. Not a good idea, because The Ropers was not a strong enough show to lead off a Saturday night lineup. It just wasn't. And sure enough, the ratings immediately began to fall. Norman Fell actually went to New York. He went to the head of ABC, went all the way up to the top and asked them to please put the show back on where it was after Three's Company on Tuesday nights, but they refused. So he, very smart man, he knew what was going to happen. The writing was on the wall early on, and sure enough, in the spring of 1980, The Ropers was canceled. And then when Norman Fell went back to the producers and reminded them of their deal, well, they said, well, the show lasted a year and a half. It went over a year. We said that if it lasted a year or less, you could come back, but it went over that time frame, so unfortunately, you can't come back. Besides, we have Don Knotts now. And, Don's doing a great job, which he was. And, we can't get rid of him. And so the Ropers, unfortunately, were out of a job. They did go back to Three's Company one time. They went back during the 1980-81 season, and that was the highest rated episode of the season. But unfortunately, you never saw the Ropers again. They were not there when Janet got married. They were not there when Jack opened his restaurant, Jack's Bistro. It's just like that they were never there, which was very unrealistic and pretty disheartening in my opinion. Now, as for Don Knotts, of course, very funny actor, multi-Emmy winning actor for his role over on the Andy Griffith Show as Barney Fife. He was tapped to be the new landlord when the Ropers left for their own show. And honestly, at the time, I thought that was absolutely brilliant casting. I thought that was one of the best moves I'd ever seen in TV, to bring Don Knotts in to be the new landlord. And of course, he was brilliant as Mr. Furley. He was so funny in that role. Now, it's a generational thing, because it seems as though the boomers, those who grew up with the Andy Griffith Show when it was on CBS during its original run, they only see Don Knotts as Barney. They don't care for him at all as Mr. Furley. However, the Gen Xers, like me, we prefer him as Mr. Furley. Now, there are some like me who also give props to how good he was as Barney, but we tend to be more partial to Mr. Furley. And again, it's all about it's a generational thing. I think that Don Knotts was brilliant in both parts. He was hilarious as Barney Fife and as Ralph Furley. So anyway, he came on the show. He was on there for the rest of the time of the show. He was on there for the remaining 5 years of Three's Company. He and John Ritter, amazing chemistry. He was just perfect on that show. He fit the zaniness of Three's Company. The show got even more zany, I think, when he came on board. The physical comedy definitely increased with John Ritter, and he just fit in perfectly. So everything was, of course, going along swimmingly. Three's Company still highly rated, still very successful. I was watching it every week, my mom and I, and everything. It was all good. I had a big crush on John Ritter for a little bit, and everything was good. Then we get to 1980, and we get to when it's time for the cast, John, Joyce, and Suzanne, to have their contract negotiations. And before I get off into that, I do want to mention Richard Klein, who portrayed Larry on the show. Larry was supposed to be on the only in one episode number 4, which was when Jack, Jed, and Chrissy got this little cute puppy from Larry, and they were hiding it from Mr. Roper. That was supposed to just be a one-time thing. But Richard Klein and John Ritter got along so well behind the scenes, and their chemistry was so good on camera. John Ritter actually suggested that they bring Larry back, from time to time. So you saw him from time to time in the second season. You saw him a little bit more in the third season. And then by the fourth season, he was made a regular. Stayed on the show until it ended in 1984. Again, Larry fitting great with the zaniness. Perfect foil, best friend for Jack. Just a really hilarious character. Again, a really smart move that they made to bring him to the show. They also brought in the character of Lana, portrayed by Ann Wedgeworth. They brought her in right before they brought in Mr. Furley. Lana was older. She was mature. She lived in the building as well. She really had it bad for Jack, but Jack did not feel the same way. Not really sure why they wrote it that way. I can't say there was an age thing, because remember the episode where Jack was involved with the Roper's aunt's daughter? Can't remember the name of the episode, but Jack had been involved with an older woman before, so it was not an age thing. I think maybe it's because of the fact that Lana was so aggressive. She was very aggressive where Jack was concerned, and I think he saw that as a turnoff. But the producers decided that they didn't know what to do with Lana. Personally, I think they should have hooked her up with Mr. Furley. I would love to see the two of them in a relationship or even married. That would have been absolutely funny. And in real life, Ann Wedgeworth, when she discussed her time on Three's Company, she said that was the best thing about being on the show, was working with Don Knotts. She didn't get the warmest welcome from Suzanne or Joyce. She didn't really have anything bad to say about John Ritter, but she particularly enjoyed her time with Don Knotts, and it would have been great to have seen the two of them involved. They should have given Mr. Furley a girlfriend. That's the only thing that's my only complaint in regard to Mr. Furley. They should have given him a steady girlfriend. Mr. Furley never had a girlfriend, never had good luck with the ladies, and I didn't really like that. I always felt badly for him in that regard. So that is my only complaint where Mr. Furley's concerned. They should have given him someone like Thelma Lou on the Andy Griffith Show. Barney, it was with Thelma Lou. They should have given Mr. Furley, a Thelma Lou type character. But, they didn't know what to do with Ann Wedgeworth's character of Lana, so they wrote her out before the season ended. I kind of don't know why they even did that to her. Why they would bring her in and then just basically, kick her off. I thought that was the producers of Three's Company. Not very nice people. Not very nice people at all. And more on that a little bit later. So anyway, you have the 1980 period where it's time to re-sign contracts. John and Joyce signed theirs, no big deal. Suzanne, however, wanted some extra things. She wanted a really big raise. She wanted to be paid $150,000 per episode. She also wanted a part of the show's profits. And the producers, the network, everyone just pretty much laughed in her face and just thought that she was crazy. So Suzanne, who's being represented at that point by her husband, Alan Hamill, her manager had been Jay Bernstein, who managed Farrah Fawcett. But she decided to let Alan, who had no experience of being a manager, take over her career. And they were under the impression that Suzanne was the star of the show. Don't get me wrong. I liked Chrissy. I thought that Chrissy was adorable, especially in the very beginning. I thought that Chrissy was so pretty and that she was ditzy, but she still was like an adult. If you look at the first 2 seasons of Three's Company, that's how you see Chrissy. As time went on, they made her more and more childlike, but, I still liked her, But I never saw her as the star of the show. Three's Company was an ensemble show. There was no star. I mean, if you did have to name someone or want to name someone who's star of the show, you'd have to name John Ritter, quite frankly. But she was turned down. And so all of a sudden, when it was time for the 1980-81 season to commence, Suzanne began to suddenly, not show up for work. She was not showing up for tapings, rehearsals. She hurt her back allegedly. There was a lot of drama in regard to the whole Suzanne Summers contract negotiation situation. It was all over everywhere. It was in all the magazines. She went on Donahue. She was slamming the cast of Three's Company, particularly John and Joyce. She was talking to TV Guide, and that's really when things turned ugly, because in the beginning, John Ritter was on her side. But when she went to the media, went to the press, that's when he turned against her. And it was just, and it's all in Chris Mann's book. He lays it out really, really thoroughly. He could describe it. He does describe it way better than I ever could. But it was really an ugly scene. It got to the point where they didn't know if Suzanne was going to show up for work or not. They would have one script with Chrissy in it and another script without Chrissy. That's how it had gotten. It had gotten just that bad. And honestly, the episodes that you have when Chrissy was gone at the beginning of the 1980-81 season, they're kind of awkward to watch, even to this day, all these years later. There's an awkwardness that's there that is very present on the screen. Probably because we all knew what was going on behind the scenes. I think that's why, And so she did come back to do an episode. It was her last episode as a regular. You could see the tension. I know I could. You could see the tension, especially between Suzanne and John. John Ritter and Suzanne Summers were very close friends. Joyce and Suzanne were not very close. They were mainly co-workers, but that was it. John and Suzanne were very good friends outside of Three's Company. And John was very hurt by the whole situation, hurt by the way that she went to the press and badmouthed and slammed everyone. And you could just, if you watch that episode, it's the episode where Chrissy's friend Darlene comes to visit. She doesn't know that she's a call girl and all that. That's the episode. That was Suzanne's last episode as a regular on Three's Company. And you can feel the tension in watching the episode. And you can really see the tension within John Ritter. He wasn't able to hide it. Joyce DeWitt definitely hid it better than John did. But there was a lot of tension within that episode. Just watching it, you can see it. I know I can't speak for anyone else, but I definitely can see it every time I watch it. And of course, there's the part where Jack and Janet, they hurry Chrissy out of, because Chrissy doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know Darlene's a call girl, and she almost gets herself caught up into a situation. And so they rescue her, and they basically kind of hurry her out of the room. Well, they kind of picked her up and just carried her out. One had one arm, one had the other arm. And of course, I'm sure you've seen the episode. Well, when they got out of the view of the camera, word has it that they dropped her really hard on the ground. She didn't fall, but she could have fallen because they dropped her down pretty hard and pretty carelessly. And then, of course, as you remember, Chrissy was making phone calls. She had gone back home to visit her mom, who was sick, and she would call and talk to Jack or Janet. Well, in actuality, she wasn't talking to Jack or Janet because John Ritter and Joyce DeWitt wanted nothing to do with Suzanne. They would not even work when Suzanne was on the set. So she was actually talking to a crew member. She was talking to one of the producers, and they just filmed it, shot the episode like they were talking to one another, but she was talking to, like I said, one of the producers. The whole thing was very unfortunate. Now, there's also, I don't think it's on YouTube anymore, or at least not right now, but there is an amazing True Hollywood story about Three's Company. It's 2 hours long. I believe they made that around 1998 or 1999. And it, too, goes into very deep detail about how all of this played out, how it all went down, and how ugly it was. And it was ugly. And it was very unfortunate because, Suzanne, to this day, defends her actions. She said that she wanted to be paid the amount that the men were being paid. I get that. You should make a difference between what men and women are being paid. She wanted to be paid the same amount as Carol O'Connor was getting, Alan Alda, Larry Hagman. She wanted that for she and Joyce, as well as, John was getting paid more than Joyce and Suzanne. She wanted them to be paid, Joyce and herself be paid, what the men were being paid. Joyce wasn't interested. Joyce DeWitt cared about acting. She cared about her craft. She didn't care about fame. She didn't care about money. She just wanted to act. That was her primary concern. Suzanne was interested in fame and interested in money and the like. So their focus was different. That's one reason why they really didn't connect very well and become close friends, because their focus was very different, from one another. But it's unfortunate, even to this day, all these years later, how everything went out and how it all played out, how it all went down. So anyway, they had to go and get a new roommate. They had to go and get someone to take Chrissy's place, because in 1981, Suzanne Somers was officially fired from Three's Company. Really, like I said, still to this day, really unfortunate. So they went and they got Jenny Lee Harrison, who had no acting experience. Jenny Lee had been a cheerleader for the LA Rams, I believe. She came in and portrayed Chrissy's cousin, Cindy Snow. And Cindy was cute. Cindy could be funny, but I don't know why the writers decided to write it to where she was always bumping into Jack with bottles of wine and the ironing board and the door. I don't know why they went that route. Don't know what that was about, but I will say this. Some of my favorite episodes are during the Cindy Snow era, like when Jack portrayed his fake twin brother, Austin. One of my favorite episodes. The episode where Jack pretended that he had died because he was trying to run away from this bully who was terrorizing him over a girl he met at the Regal Beagle. There was the one when Jack decided to swear off lying. So there were some really funny episodes. The one where Jack was pretending to be this chef named David Miller, and he ended up in all kinds of hot water. All of those episodes were from the Cindy Snow era. And so those, like I said, are really funny episodes. And Jenny Lee, like I said, she was not the best actress because she had no experience. But she did the best that she could. I gave her props for putting all that she had into the part and doing her very best. Now, by 1981, by the end of the 80-81 season, the producers wanted to replace Jenny Lee and bring in yet another blonde roommate. So again, they went out, another casting call, another blonde, to come on board and be that third roommate. That third roommate, the third blonde, would be Priscilla Barnes. Priscilla Barnes had been in episodic television before. She'd been in episodes of Taxi, Starsky and Hutch, Love Boat. She'd been in a very short-lived show on CBS. So she had experience. And she came in there in the fall of 1981. She was Terry Alden. She was a nurse, a lot like Janet, very mature, very intelligent, very independent and self-sufficient. And you really had both of the female roommates, they were very mature. The dumb blonde stereotype departed with the presence and the addition of Priscilla Barnes. Now, Priscilla Barnes and Joyce DeWitt became very close friends behind the scenes. They are still very close friends today. And when Terry came into the picture, the ratings didn't fall for Three's Company, fortunately, very much. They did dip during that whole Suzanne debacle, and you brought in Jenny Lee. The ratings did dip somewhat, but they didn't dip dramatically. However, when Priscilla came on board, the ratings jumped right back up, and it was back in the top 10 again, like up around number 4 or 5, up in that area. So Three's Company, again, back on top, doing really well. They kept Jenny Lee around for a season, then they wrote her out again. When Janet got married, Cindy was not there. Cindy, too, never visited Jack's Bistro. Cindy, again, just disappeared, which, again, just like with the Ropers, I don't agree with the way that they chose to just write these characters out like they were never there. I thought that was very poor writing. They could have definitely had them come back, even just from time to time, even just once or twice, would have been more realistic. So, that's something else that I disagree with in regard to the way that they went with Three's Company. So anyway, by 1983, 1984, the ratings, of course, began to drop because sitcoms were kind of, declining. It was all about action shows and nighttime soap operas. Those were the main top TV shows as of 1983 and 1984. The sitcoms, there were still sitcoms on, of course, but they were kind of being overlooked in favor of action shows like Hardcastle and McCormick, The A-Team, Riptide, and of course the nighttime soaps like Dallas and Knots Landing and Dynasty. So Three's Company, for the first time, began to really tumble in the ratings. And by 1984, the producers decided that they wanted to spin John Ritter off into his own TV show. They've been wanting to do that. They actually first brought that up to him around 1979, believe it or not. But John was comfortable being on Three's Company. He didn't want to do a spinoff. He wanted to stay where he was, and I'm glad that he made that decision. Very smart man. By 1984, though, he was ready to go ahead and try this spinoff. So what they did, the producers, sent everyone else on a hiatus right in the middle of the season, right in the middle of season 8. They all went on hiatus, except for John. Well, while all the other cast members were gone, they decided to ease in John's spinoff, Three's a Crowd. The character of Jack Turner would finally settle down with one girl. He finally fell in love and settled down with her. And the show was about their life together. And her interfering father, who didn't care for Jack or the fact that his daughter was living with a guy. The dad was portrayed by Robert Mandan, who was best known as being Chester Tate over on Soap. The character of Jack's new girlfriend was portrayed by Mary Carteret, and of course her name was Vicki Bradford. So when the rest of the cast came back to Three's Company, everything was already in place for the new spinoff, unbeknownst to all of them. Joyce DeWitt especially hurt and outraged by the whole thing, because John and Joyce were also very good friends behind the scenes. They had been together since the second pilot in 1976, and so she felt that John owed her some kind of an explanation as for about this pilot. She felt that he should have been upfront with her and honest with her and told her what they were doing, but he chose to not mention it. Now, maybe he didn't want to hurt her. Maybe he didn't know how to bring it up. I know that was a tough position that John was in. He is excited about the spinoff, no doubt, but how are you going to tell the others? How are you going to tell Joyce? He probably just didn't know how to handle that. And I could understand that. I can empathize with him on that. I empathize with he and Joyce, as well as Richard Klein, Priscilla Barnes, and Don Knotts. It was really, really tough. Robert Mandan said in the E! True Hollywood story that I just mentioned that it was very, very emotional on set in the final episodes, that he and Mary Carteret just pretty much stayed out of the way and remained in the background because it was really tough. I don't care for the way Three's Company ended. The ending was rushed. I still say that to this day. How long has it been? 1984 to 2022. 38 years later. Yeah, 38 years later, I'm still saying this. The ending of Three's Company was rushed. You didn't have any, you had no plans at all in regard to Larry or Mr. Furley. Terry, you sent her off to Hawaii. She's going to move to Hawaii and, she's still going to be a nurse. Janet ups and gets married all of a sudden to this guy named Philip. Jack, of course, falls in love with Vicky and they're going to move in together. But, it wrapped up so haphazardly. It was such of a disservice to the actors. It was a disservice to the viewers. And I was not happy at the time about how they wrapped this all up, because I knew what was going on behind the scenes, because, I've always been a voracious reader and I've always followed my favorite TV shows. So I knew what was happening. I was reading TV Guide, People Magazine, the paper. My mom had the paper in the house, So I knew what was happening. I knew why they were wrapping Three's Company up in such a quick fashion. They didn't even have Janet's parents there for the wedding. Her sister wasn't there for the wedding. It was just ridiculous the way that they wrote it. But they were trying to just wrap Three's Company up ASAP so they could get focused, get started with Three's a Crowd. And that's what they did. Three's a Crowd, of course, ran for just one season on ABC. I did watch it in the beginning, but at the time, I absolutely detested Vicky Bradford. I detested her, couldn't stand her, I hated her. So I stopped watching it after about probably 5, 6, 7 episodes. I just stopped. Interestingly enough, I did see the entire season of Three's a Crowd years later on Antenna TV. And being older, being more mature, I realized that Vicky was really not that bad. She wasn't that terrible after all. I was overreacting. But so Three's a Crowd didn't do that well in the ratings. The only character from Three's Company to pop up over there was Larry. Of course, Joyce DeWitt was not going to have anything to do with it. Probably not Priscilla Barnes either, but they could have definitely had Mr. Furley back. They should have had Don Knotts come back, and that would have been funny to have him back with Jack again. He and John Ritter, that would have been great, but they missed the ball. They dropped the ball on that. So here's what happened. I've heard 2 stories. I don't know which is true. One, I heard that Three's a Crowd was going to be renewed, but John Ritter wanted more money, and they turned him down, so he refused to continue with the show. The other story that I heard was that Three's Company was canceled in favor of Different Strokes. Different Strokes, of course, had been on NBC for 7 years. NBC canceled it, but ABC chose to pick it up for one final season. And they gave Three's a Crowd the boot, ABC did, to make room for that last season of Different Strokes. Now, I don't know if both of those stories are true, of course, that is what happened. They did bring on Different Strokes, but I don't know if they canceled Three's a Crowd for that reason or not. I'm not sure which story is accurate. I need to look that up in Chris Mann's book, because he definitely would know which story is true, or they might both be true. I don't know. But Three's a Crowd lasted again one season. It ended in 1985, and that was pretty much the end of Three's Company. There were never any reunions on screen. Unfortunately, there have been some, for example, there was a private reunion in the 90s. It was Norman Fell, Joyce DeWitt, Don Knotts, Priscilla Barnes, and Richard Klein. Of course, there was the reunion on screen between John Ritter and Don Knotts in an episode of 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter. There was a Three's Company spoof in the episode. John Ritter portrayed Mr. Roper in the episode. He woke up and he said he had a nightmare, and he ends up seeing himself in bed with Don Knotts. And those two, of course, were hilarious together. It was so funny to see the two of them on screen again one more time. It was great. He actually wanted Joyce and Suzanne to come on 8 Simple Rules with him instead. Now, Suzanne declined. I don't know if Joyce accepted or not. She might have declined as well, but Suzanne declined. Suzanne said that they should wait for a different project. But unfortunately, John passed away a short time later, and they never had a chance to do that, that other project that she was talking about. That's why I always say, don't waste time with people. If you want to see someone, if you want to do something with someone, do it. Don't waste time. Don't put it off, because look what happened in this case. It was great to see, like I said, John Ritter and Don Knotts together again. But yeah, it would have been great to see John along with Suzanne and Joyce again. Because John, of course, and Suzanne were on the outs for years. Suzanne and Joyce were on the outs for years. Fortunately, Suzanne and John did make up. His second wife, Amy Yazbek, brought them back together. And Joyce and Suzanne reunited back in 2012 on Suzanne's TV show. She had a talk show, and they reunited for the first time. And it's on YouTube. It's a beautiful reunion. Very, very touching, very heartwarming. Don't know if they're in touch now. I don't know if it was just a one-time thing or not, but it was great to see at the time. And they're also on YouTube as well. For the 40th anniversary of Three's Company, you had a reunion of Joyce DeWitt, Richard Klein, Priscilla Barnes, and Jenny Lee Harrison, where they're talking about Three's Company, down through the years. Definitely, I would recommend checking that out too. So Three's Company is still very, very much beloved. Very loyal fan base. There are groups on Facebook. I'm in a couple of them. There is lots of great memorabilia available on YouTube, the trading cards, magazines, the Chrissy doll, all kinds of good stuff that you can pick up. Of course, like I said, Chris Mann's book, you have to have that if you're a Three's Company fan. The entire series is available on DVD. You can go to Amazon and check that out, pick that up. Also eBay. And again, like I said, there's Pluto, there's Antenna. So Three's Company, I even have a Three's Company t-shirt. I don't remember where I got it from. I got it about 6 years ago. There was a TV guide in 1978 where John, Joyce, and Suzanne, it was an illustrated TV guide. It was very popular in the 70s, those illustrated TV guides. I bought the TV guide, as a matter of fact, at the time. And this t-shirt has that picture from that TV guide on the t-shirt. You can get all different colors of the t-shirt. I don't know if it's still available. This was back in 2016, but I got it in green, and I love wearing that t-shirt because, like I said, I love Three's Company. I do. I love all of the characters that were on the show, and I have my favorite episodes, and it still brings a lot of joy and a lot of happiness to my heart whenever I see it. Whenever I see some kind of a Three's Company documentary on, whenever I see Suzanne Summers, because she has her own podcast now, and I follow her on Instagram. Whenever I see anything about Joyce DeWitt or Priscilla Barnes, I am just filled with joy. That show is a huge part of my childhood, and I loved watching it back then, and I love watching it now. So I am really honored that I was able to do this episode about Three's Company and to show Three's Company some love, although it still gets a lot of love today already. But I wanted to do an episode about one of my favorite shows that I grew up with. And like I said, it's brought joy and happiness to so many people. It's so hilariously funny. It's timeless. And it's just, as I look at it now, I really am struck by the friendship of the roommates. Whether we're looking at Jack, Janet, and Chrissy, or Jack, Janet, and Cindy, or Jack, Janet, and Terry, the friendship, the closeness, that bond is what's so special. The way that the kids, as they were called, were so close to the Ropers, the way that they were so close to Larry, so close to Mr. Furley, the way that Larry and Mr. Furley were friends. I mean, just the friendships within that show are priceless to reflect back upon and to watch today. So I had to do this episode, and it was my privilege and my honor to be able to do so, and a lot of fun. It's always fun to talk about Three's Company. Always fun to talk about it, to reminisce about it, to watch it. And I want to thank you for listening and for checking this out. And I hope that you will join me when I come back for another episode sometime very soon in the near future. And until then, I'll see you next time.